Hi guys, Crypto here from Cryptocurrency Investing Facebook group. I've got a really special guest on the line today. We have Jeff Berwick from the Vigilante. How are you today, Jeff?
I'm doing pretty good, thank you.
Great. Really happy to have you here, mate. So we've got about 150,000 members in this group, so hopefully a few of them will join us today. Most people out there probably know who you are, Jeff. Do you want to give us a little introduction about yourself, who you are, what you do, where you come from, where you're going?
Sure. Yeah, if you're into cryptocurrency and you haven't heard of me, I don't know how you managed to do that. I've been talking about it since 2011 on everywhere, Facebook and YouTube and everything. I'm the Vigilante, and our whole approach is a anarcho-capitalist, Austrian economics-based financial newsletter that covers the upcoming collapse of all fiat currencies. So I really got into crypto. We started Vigilante in 2010, and a lot of people asked me, well, if the dollar and everything's going to collapse, what's going to take its place? And I said, I don't know, but I'm sure the market will come up with something. And 1 year later, I found out about Bitcoin in 2011, around $3. And once I realized what it was, I became one of the biggest proponents of it.
Great. And where are you now, Jeff? And you know, you're living in Mexico the same as me. How's everything over in Acapulco today?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I live here in Acapulco, Mexico, which we pretty much just call an Acapulco. It's very, very free over here, and that's why it gets demonized a lot in international mainstream television programming, which they do a lot. And as you know, a lot of the things they say about Mexico isn't quite exactly how it is here. A lot of people think it's really dangerous and all that, but what it is really actually quite free and actually not that dangerous whatsoever.
Yeah, no, I love living it down here in Mexico, and you know, I love the way you use the word free, and I do believe that you know, there's probably there's the powers that be out there that don't want people to be so free. So while we're waiting for people to sort of log into the live stream here, maybe we could kind of talk about why is it important for cryptocurrency and blockchain. Why do you feel it's important that this succeeds, and you know, what kind of battles are we going to come against?
Well, to me, it's way bigger than most people think. A lot of people seem to have the idea that cryptocurrencies are this sort of novelty. Well, even if they've gotten that far, because a lot of people still think it's some sort of scam or something along those lines. But it's really much more fundamentally important to humanity than most people realize, because we've essentially been under the control of central banks since at least 1913 with the founding of the Federal Reserve, which is actually the third central bank of the United States. And a lot of people don't know that. The founding fathers, most of them were very against a central bank. Central banking is actually a tenet of communism, but it's actually one of the main things that keeps this massive power structure into place. It gives them the ability to essentially rob everyone on earth. It's a big scam. Central banking is nothing more than a scam. They've managed to do it for over 100 years now. A lot of people still don't realize that Henry Ford, the founder of the Ford automobile in the early 20th century, said if you understood how the monetary system works, there'd be a revolution tomorrow. And that's still generally the case. If people actually understood what was going on, they would not be very happy at all. They'd realize they've been essentially robbed their entire lives by this system. And of course, the system also engenders and enables all these wars, and that's including every war since the Federal Reserve was founded in 1913. It's no coincidence whatsoever that the World War I happened 1 year later. It's also no coincidence that they put in the income tax in the US. There was no income tax before then. There was still roads, there was still militia, there was still lots of things, but there was no income tax. And that was put in 1913 as well. So this whole system has been put in place like that, and they're only able to do things like these major wars. No one even knew why World War I happened. There's still, everyone today is like, why did that happen? And they're like, well, some prince or something got killed. It's like, well, why do people care about that? And really, people didn't. You could still see, if you look back at World War I, a lot of the troops on Christmas Day on both sides, they'd just be playing soccer and stuff, and then the generals would come out and say, yeah, you got to get back to killing each other. And they're like, why? And they're like, well, if you don't, then we're going to kill you. And they're like, okay, we'll do it. And then they moved on to World War II. And all kinds of wars, of course, the Gulf of Tonkin with Vietnam, and it just goes on and on. All these are actually financed by central banks, and their central banks are behind virtually all of those things. Ron Paul said that it's no coincidence that the 20th century was the century of total war and also was the century of central banking. You can't have these massive wars without the power of the printing press, without printing up money, which most people don't realize just devalues all the dollars that they have. So it's a stealth tax on everyone, and essentially because we have fiat currencies everywhere in the world today, with all backed by central banks. There's no central bank in a few countries, or there wasn't anyway until they were bombed, and that's places like Libya, where they bombed it a couple of years ago. And the very next day after the bombing, they actually installed a central bank. You can look this all up. This is all factual information. Iraq didn't have one. Iran doesn't have one. We're not exactly one that's controlled by the Rothschilds anyway. North Korea doesn't have one. You might recognize a lot of these countries as the ones that are constantly being attacked or demonized. It's because they want to have central banks in every country in the world, and eventually they want to have a one world central bank. And that's a way to control and to impoverish all the world and create massive conflicts and wars. So to get to the answer to your question, the reason why cryptocurrency is so important is because it's an alternative currency outside of the control of the power structure that can't be inflated at will by the power structure and controlled by the power structure, meaning that they can't actually do all of the really bad things they're doing if people start using cryptocurrency. They can't impoverish everyone. So most of the poverty in the world is caused by central banks today. They're also caused by governments, and governments are only propped up for the most part by central banks. And I just mentioned how all wars are financed by central banks. They actually usually finance both sides. Even back in World War II, it was actually the Bush family and a number of other families, and of course the Rothschilds, and they financed both sides of that war and profited massively from it and impoverished everyone in the process. So essentially what I'm saying is, if everyone in the world started using cryptocurrency that wasn't controlled by governments and couldn't even be tracked by governments, and that's what a lot of cryptocurrencies are working on, we would have hardly any poverty in the world, and we would have no war. So that sounds pretty good to me. So that's why I'm a big proponent of cryptocurrency.
Yeah, no, you're right, Jeff. And I think you're probably one of the first people to bring to people's attention. Like, if you speak to a lot of people and you mention central banks or Fed banks, they actually believe that it is a part of the government system when it's actually a private unit that has one customer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Most people don't know that. They don't teach you that in the government indoctrination camps, which they force people into for 12 years in the US and most countries across the world now. And Vladimir Lenin even said way back in the early 20th century, if you give me your child for 4 years, the seed I plant will never be uprooted. Now they have them for 12 years doing their Pledge of Allegiance every day, teaching them, not really even teaching them, actually indoctrinating them with mostly propaganda and useless information that they'll never use until after 12 years. They don't even want to learn anymore. All they want to do is have a beer because they're so demolished and destroyed. They have no creativity, and they're just taught to be slaves essentially. So you have all that going on with people just being indoctrinated into these sorts of things. So they just really don't realize how this entire money system works. And if they did, they'd be really upset about it. But your average person has no idea. In fact, if you're sitting there right now and you have a US $1 bill, turn it over. And why is there a pyramid with an all-seeing eye on it? And actually, if you put a pentagram across it, it spells out Mason. Well, the reason is because the US was actually founded by Freemasons, one of the secret societies that are generally behind the power structure. And they control most things that we know today because they have control of the money system. So most people just don't even understand how it all works. They just read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island by J. Edward Griffin, and it shows with actual information how the Federal Reserve was founded. It was all in secret, all by oligarchs, all by people like J.P. Morgan, and all those sort of people. Sorry, my dogs are going a little crazy here. And they essentially were put it in stealth, and they actually had these are all documented information. They wanted to make sure that people thought it was part of the government. What it really was an actual takeover of the government by the bankers, and it's been that way ever since. And essentially, when you control the money of a country, you really control the money. It was Rothschild who said, I care not who makes the laws, all I care is who controls the money, and I control the money, he said. That was back in the 1800s. So they had this fairly big plan, a multi-generational plan to roll these things things out across the world, and they've done so. And when they control the money, they really do control the governments, because they can go to any government and say, hey, if you don't do what we want, and that can include going to war or doing all sorts of things or putting in all kinds of taxes, then we will essentially rescind your money supply. And it will cause such a massive depression, which is what they did in 1929. The Great Depression was all done by the Federal Reserve. They increased the money supply dramatically. Most people don't know how that affects the economy. A lot of people think they're a lot richer all of a sudden because there seems to be a lot of money in the economy, but they're actually a lot poorer and they don't realize it. Then they rescind the money supply and everything crashes, and they buy everything on pennies on the dollar. And they've been doing that pretty much regularly, almost every 7 years on average, ever since the Federal Reserve was founded. So your average person has no idea, and they won't teach you this. You'll never hear about this on CNBC. You'll never hear about this on any television programming, because if people did really realize what was going on, I don't think they'd be very happy about it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Jeff. And for those of you that have just joining into the live stream and you're thinking, who are these guys talking about wars and federal banks and Rothschild? Basically, I'm here today with Jeff Berwick from the Dollar Vigilante live stream here on Cryptocurrency Investing Facebook group. And I want to just spend a little bit of time talking about the problems and the issues, which is what we're doing now. And then we're going to get on to the solutions. I love to talk about solutions, and I believe that blockchain and cryptocurrency, we've never had a better opportunity in our lifetime. You know, we can stand around and complain about, you know, I don't know too many people who like governments and like banks. Most people tolerate, don't understand, and put up with it. So it's nice to sort of bring awareness to the issues that, or just some of the issues that blockchain and cryptocurrency are going to fix. I see it disrupting things like the charity sector, things like Red Cross, World Vision, the banking sector, all those sort of things. Jeff, what sectors do you think or feel will be disrupted the most, and which ones should be disrupted the most through cryptocurrency and blockchain?
Well, I think if cryptocurrency can continue to gain usage and become more widely used, it will disrupt virtually everything in the world that we know of today, because we kind of live in a bit of a false world, a false economy, because it's all based on debt. It's all based on money printing. There's so much government rules and regulation and taxation that's just constantly robbing people. So everything that we see today is all based on that. If cryptocurrencies can catch on as people start using them and start moving away from government issued currencies, fiat currencies like the US dollar and virtually every other currency issued by a government, they will lose most of their power, and most of the things that they do will go away. So as I mentioned, wars will go away. We'll see so much more prosperity because people won't be constantly robbed through inflation and taxation and the regulation that governments do, which they can mostly only do because they're backed by the central banks. So if cryptocurrency can catch on, we'll see that happen. And then everything else will be disrupted as well, because most things in the world today are all part of that sort of system. So you look at even the mainstream media, that's mostly all controlled by the central bank sort of people, the power elites, or whatever you want to call them, the power structure. There's so many different words for what you want to call them. That will go away. They won't have the funding for it anymore. Then you see actual real media getting out and actual real information about what's actually going on in the world, not complete propaganda, which is virtually all that mainstream media puts out today. Then you just look at every other industry, look at the legal profession, so-called profession. It's mostly just a bunch of parasites living off of this government's illegitimate legal structure, which now in the US, you're talking about libraries full of books, full of laws. There's really only one law that you really need, and that's don't hurt anybody. And by that, I mean, don't hurt anybody, don't attack them, don't punch them, don't kill them, don't rape them, don't steal from them. And that's essentially the only law that you really need. But under this crazy structure that they've got, you've got literally, I don't even know how many lawyers are in the US, but as you know, Scott, it's like, if you're not getting sued for something in the US, then you must be just living in a cabin in the woods, because almost everyone is. All these things will go away. We really don't need these sort of structures in those sort of ways. All of these things can be provided by the free market much better. exponentially better. You'd actually see courts, private courts, where you'd actually get a case done in a few hours, not a few years, and it wouldn't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. It would cost pennies. And once everything's on the blockchain where you have title to things, then you really don't hardly even need lawyers. If I have a token which represents a property here in Acapulco, and someone sees that as being legitimate because it's accepted by the other people around here as, yes, if you've got that token, you own that property, then if you want to buy my place, you just send me some Ethereum and I send you the token. Done. And we can maybe use an intermediary, which would be a private intermediary. So you'd see the legal profession gone. Even the medical profession, which is so corporate controlled, they actually keep everyone as sick as possible. That's the entire rule of the pharmaceutical industrial complex, the medical system, is to get you sick and keep you sick for life. Those will go away because once you have the money power taken away from them, they can't afford to do all that anymore. And people will go back to using natural remedies for things. And there's literally a natural remedy for everything out there. All of these pills that the doctors give you, the guys in white lab coats who look like butchers, they literally are butchers, and they are drug dealers. It's funny how they flip everything. They say a guy on the street who's selling some cannabis to someone, which actually cures cancer, is a drug dealer, whereas the doctors should be really respected. It's the exact opposite. So we'd actually see almost everything that we know today go away, and it would be so much better. Now, a lot of people get really scared because there'd be so much change. Well, get used to it because it's going to happen anyway, but it's actually nothing to be too scared of. In fact, if you're scared of getting out of this slavery system that we're all in today, we're all being impoverished, we're all being controlled, we're all being tyrannically forced to do so many things. A lot of us are getting beat up or shot by cops. If you're scared that's going to go away, and wars will go away, and all these other things that I just mentioned will go away, I don't know what to tell you, but you should get over it because it can't get any worse than that. It can only get better.
Yeah, it's interesting, that you say that. I was playing golf yesterday I met a young guy on the golf course. From where was he? He was from Oklahoma or somewhere, and he was a dentist. And he actually did 6 or 7 years in medical school, and decided to be a dentist because of all of the insurance scams that go on in the medical pharmaceutical business and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of industries that are going to be disrupted. So let's just now turn to some of the people in the group. There's a few questions being thrown out there. Steve Haller, I know Steve. Steve's from Las Vegas. Steve used to live here in Playa del Carmen as well. And I know Steve. It's interesting because when I first met Steve, he was one of those very staunch, he loved the government, and now he getting into crypto and blockchain. I think his eyes are opening up a bit, and he's really getting into the crypto. So Steve's asked a couple of questions here. Well, he's got a statement. I don't think it is so much about the currencies in crypto. I don't think it's so much about the currencies in crypto as it is in blockchain technology. The more that businesses, charities, every company gets into smart contracts and the use of this technology, then the coins will be the beneficiary to funding. So how important is the actual blockchain part of all of this? When I first speak to people and they ask me about what is Bitcoin, I automatically just tell them to go and start investigating what blockchain is. So, how important is the blockchain technology? And what are your thoughts on, you see Walmart now saying that they're getting into blockchain technology, and Kodak and PayPal. And I don't personally see how PayPal can create a cryptocurrency, but I don't know, what's all of your thoughts on all that and the way that the corporate structure and governments are starting to talk about using blockchain technology, and can they use blockchain technology? What's your thoughts on all that sort of stuff, Jeff?
Well, Steve mentioned that he doesn't think the currency part is all that important. For everything I just said, I think it's incredibly important. It's the key to all of these control structures is controlling the currency. So if, for example, Bitcoin recently was essentially moved from being a digital cash to all of a sudden they're all saying it's going to be digital gold. It's not going to be used as a currency. The fees to use it will be too high, and it takes too long for your average person to use it as a currency. I think this was somewhat of a takeover of Bitcoin to make it so it's not a currency. And that's what happened with the Bitcoin Cash fork that happened on August 1st last year, is the people that were involved in Bitcoin Cash said, well, if you're going to go this route, we're going to keep Bitcoin the way that it was initially intended by Satoshi Nakamoto. It's right there on the white paper. It's supposed to be a P2P, peer-to-peer digital currency. And it's incredibly important that at some point we have a currency that cannot be controlled by governments and central banks. If we don't, all those things that I mentioned, the wars, so many things will still keep in place. The poverty caused by central banks will still keep in place. Now, Steve mentions that blockchain has so many uses, and that, yes, it will definitely change industries. Even if we don't have a crypto that actually becomes used as a currency, we will still see major changes. If I was a lawyer right now, I wouldn't bother going, or if I wanted to be a lawyer, I wouldn't bother going to 8 years of law school. I'd look into blockchain technology and how I can work with that in one way or another, because that's going to absolutely be the future. You can't really stop a lot of these things now that the cat's out of the bag and this technology exists and people are starting to figure out how to use it. And that's why things like EOS, which is launching very soon, is a smart contract platform, very important. Ethereum, of course, is very important. It's important we actually have a number of different ones, and they're all tried in different ways so that we can find out which ways are the best and people can try different things. But yes, there's going to be so much disruption from crypto. So the people out there like Peter Schill, who says that like it's like Beanie Babies, I don't know what kind of ignorance level you need to not realize what's going on, but it's so important what's going on. This is the biggest change since the internet came out, and I found out about the internet about 1993. That's about as early as most people found out about it. And as soon as I heard about it, I said, this is going to change everything. And I think we can all agree today that the internet has really changed most things. And blockchain technology is going to do the same thing. Now, you asked about, what about these big corporate entities such as Walmart, which get so many government benefits, and actually a lot of the regulations of government are actually supportive of these large monopolies. What will happen if they start using blockchain technology? Well, you have to be very aware that blockchain can really be almost anything. It's a fairly vague term. So yeah, Walmart could have its own blockchain. I could have my own blockchain, but I can set all the rules on it and I can make it so I can control it. If it's controlled by one entity, and it's not decentralized, then it's really not a blockchain in those terms, in the terms that I talk about them anyway, in the way that blockchain's always been used as a term. And I'm sure they're going to start changing that and say, oh, everything's blockchain now, it's great, but don't use Bitcoin, that's what drug dealers use and all that sort of stuff, because they don't want that. The key is to make sure that we continue to use their fiat currency so that they can retain power in all the ways that I said before. But yeah, we're going to see so many things coming out. You mentioned that you don't see how PayPal could have a digital currency. I totally can. It's obvious they have to go that way. All of these systems have to start going that way. Now, again, PayPal highly likely will not do a blockchain that's completely decentralized and they have no control over. They'll do a blockchain that really they will control. It'll be a digital sort of agenda system or a way of auditing, a way of keeping track of things, but they will have complete control over it. And in that sense, it really won't be what we're talking about in terms of blockchain and decentralization. It'll just be a form of it that is actually controlled, but everything is going to have to go digital here at some point. I expect every stock that you see on a stock market will, in the next few years, become tokens. Because it makes so much more sense. If you just look at the way stocks are done today, if you actually understood how stocks are done, it's unbelievable. It hasn't changed since the early 20th century. Literally, when you buy a stock, if you actually want to take possession of that stock, paperwork has to be sent all across the world. It gets stored in like a underground vault somewhere, and there's all these stamps on it and everything. Of course, everything's going to go digital, and I expect that to happen, but it won't. When you hear about a lot of these big corporations or even governments issuing digital currencies, it's basically the exact opposite of what decentralized cryptocurrencies are.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I meant. I meant was, how could something like PayPal be decentralized? And there's a few other people asking some questions on here. So, and a couple of good points. Eric Zimmerman, nice to have you on board, Eric. Thanks for joining in on the conversation. So Eric's got two questions here that I did want to discuss today. And basically what he says is, and what's to stop all of this being centralized once we get going, which brings me to a point that I kind of want to discuss as well, is what's the reality here, Jeff, about, when we all know that in the beginning of technology, they ignore it, then they, laugh at it, then they start to take it seriously, then they break it, then they control it. So what's the reality here? And a lot of people in the group are always talking about this. What is the reality that we can live in a decentralized world, or that they will allow us to live in a decentralized world? And you know, should everything be completely decentralized? You know, there's a lot of people say to me, there's a lot of cowboys out there, like the exchanges. And so you can't sort of regulate some things and not regulate others, right? So I guess what I really want to talk about here is the reality of what's going to be centralized, what's going to be regulated, what should be regulated, what shouldn't be regulated. Maybe none of it should be regulated. What's the reality, Jeff, of, you know, governments aren't just going to stand back and let this happen? What's the reality, and what do you think is maybe the process or the road that we're going down here?
Nothing should be regulated by a government. A government is a mafia that lives off extortion, off of involuntary people who are being extorted. To have them regulating the market is absolute insanity. We've seen how that works out. You mentioned, will they allow us to decentralize? Well, that's the whole point of decentralizing, is we don't need them to allow us. This is the whole point. It breaks us away from having to live under this governmental control grid, this power structure system, essentially the matrix. We now have the ability, if we want to, as humanity, to say, no, I don't want to have a bank account at JP Morgan Chase. I want to actually own my own money and keep it in whatever form I want, and that you cannot touch something like Bitcoin or other forms of cryptocurrency. So it's not that they allow it, and absolutely the governments are going to do everything, and the central banks as well, to try to stop people from doing these sort of things. It'll really come down to seeing how many people in the world really want to stop being slaves and actually own themselves and begin to say no to these systems. Of course, if most people in the world, and so many of them have gone through all these indoctrination camps generation after generation, they've all been the benefit or actual unbenefit of propaganda from all their governments. It doesn't matter what government you're from, you've got all the propaganda. So most people are brainwashed slaves. And if they really decide that they don't want to be a part of being free and they want to be slaves, they will drag most of us with them. However, I think there's enough people out there at the moment, and it is growing, and we are spreading this information, that people will start to decide, I don't really want to be a slave anymore. And you look at how the government regulates or criminalizes things. Cannabis, or marijuana as they call it, has been criminalized in the US for decades, even though George Washington was a cannabis farmer, and cannabis actually cures cancer, and cannabis is so much better than cutting down trees for paper, and it's so useful in so many ways. It was actually made illegal by the DuPont family in the early 20th century because they said, we can't compete with cannabis. We want to be able to patent all of our plastics and all of our pharmaceuticals and all of these things, so we have to make cannabis illegal. Well, they did make it illegal. It's still been illegal. It's starting to become decriminalized, or at least legalized in some states in the US, but you can even still today, it's still really not happening. There's still people every day being accosted by cops and thrown into rape camps because they got caught with a plant in their backyard or something like that. But how many people have actually smoked cannabis or marijuana or done something with it? It's actually most people I know. So there you have a case where the government's been really strict on trying to outlaw it, and it still is pretty much anywhere that you want, you can find it, and it's not a problem. Same thing with things like heroin. If you want heroin, you could probably find it, and that's been decriminalized heavily for so long. So many things have been criminalized, even back in the alcohol prohibition in the 30s, where they actually outlawed alcohol in the land of the free. There was more people drinking alcohol afterwards than there was before. And this is quite normal if people want to be free. The real question today is, have people been indoctrinated and brainwashed enough that they don't even know what freedom is anymore, and maybe don't even want it at this point? That'll be the true question. But we'll see what happens. But in general, you know, I forget what question was exactly. Do you remember the exact question? There was a point.
The exact.
I get rolling on.
Sorry. Yeah, you were rolling there, brother, and I got caught up in what you were talking about. Sorry. We were talking about the reality about the government's controlling this.
I remember it. The question, it was, what if we have, because I was reading it as you were talking about it, he was saying, once we have some winners, you know, like let's say Bitcoin,
yes.
well known and used across the world, what will stop it from being centralized? Well, that again is the case. The fight for freedom is a ongoing battle, and even the founding fathers, as cultish as that is, to actually call these people your founding fathers, that's no different than people in North Korea calling the Kim family their founding fathers. It's weird and cultish, and you're obviously brainwashed if you believe that. But even those people used to say way back in the day that about what was it about control? Oh yeah, centralization. I kind of lost my what I was going to say about the founding.
No, we were talking about how the government, once the winning cryptos are out there, they go about being regulating it, and how do we know they're not just going to start regulating it?
Yeah, so it will really depend on the people. So the great thing about cryptocurrencies is they are open source software for the most part. And again, if they're not open source software, they're really not what we're talking about here, right? These are the ways that the big government and central banks are going to try to co-opt this space. They're going to try to tell people that, oh, it's fine if it's all privatized and patented and all that sort of thing. But if people really want a decentralized currency, a thing like Bitcoin, even today, is still open source software. You still can have a say in various ways just by if you use it or not in how it goes. If down the road, Bitcoin becomes used worldwide, and if most people who use it don't pay attention and allow it to be changed over time by certain nefarious actors, then that will happen. So it's really a struggle ongoing to remind people to not be slaves. And if people don't remember that, then they will continue to be slaves and almost enslave all of us in the process. So if enough people understand, and this is why I talk about this so much, because most people don't understand it. A lot of cryptocurrency people, you have 100,000 people on your page there. I'll bet a lot of them are just there because they heard about Lambos or going to the moon or whatever it is. They have no idea there's a philosophical idea behind this whole thing. And if enough people don't understand that, then you could see everything change. You could see, we've seen it already with Bitcoin. Enough people got fooled by this latest Bitcoin change that it got changed from being digital cash to a digital gold, which essentially can't be used as a currency. If that continues to happen with all the other cryptocurrencies, then yes, well, eventually we'll be back where we started. That's why it's so important that at least enough of us understand this, that we can keep pushing to try to get people to begin to free themselves and stop becoming slaves.
Do you spend your crypto, Jeff? I mean, me personally, any chance I've got, I will actually try to spend it. And the reason I'm bringing this up, Alex in the group asked a question saying, if we look at it realistically, do we really think that people are investing in crypto because that they see the benefits and what it's disrupting, or are they just getting into it to store it as wealth and try and make some cash and buy some Lambos with it? Where are we in that battle of wealth storage, and people just thinking they're going to make money and double and triple and go to the moon and all that sort of stuff, as opposed to people who genuinely are into it because of what it stands for?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I don't know what everyone in the world's thinking. As far as actually using cryptocurrency, myself personally, I always prefer, whenever I can, to get rid of fiat currency, just because it's that, what's it called, Murphy's Law? There's a Gresham's Law, I think it's called, where when you have two currencies, you try to get rid of the one that's devaluing the most first, the less sound money. And of course, fiat currencies are just constantly being devalued. That's the whole point of central banks, to constantly devalue the currency. You look at what things were valued in 1913, around when the Federal Reserve was founded, and it'd be like 5 cents for McDonald's. I don't think McDonald's existed, but it'd be like literally just a few pennies. Now you look, it's like $5. So it's the Federal Reserve note. It's not even called the U.S. dollar. It's called a Federal Reserve note. You just have to look at what's written on it. Is devalued by like 99 point something percent since they issued it. So I actually prefer to get rid of it as much as possible. But I do use cryptocurrencies a lot, and part of the reason is that we have a lot of people who work for us or with us across the world. I have numerous, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, I don't even know. And most of them are in different countries all across the world. To be sending out bank wire transfers, or even PayPal, which is a pain in the butt, to send things, and not to mention the cost of it, is very prohibitive to do. Actually, I don't know how I do it in some cases, but everyone obviously who works with me or for me is obviously a fan of crypto, so they all want Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash. Those are the two that we mostly use. With Bitcoin there, the transaction fees were getting so high after they changed it to digital gold that one transaction fee I had, Scott, was I was trying to move 3 Bitcoin from one wallet to another one, and the transaction fee was $2,000 on my Celium. And the reason was because we accept a lot of payments for a lot of very small things like our monthly subscription fee. And you can subscribe, by the way, at dollarvigilante.com/subscribe. It's only about $20 a month. We get in like hundreds and hundreds of $20 Bitcoin payments. And because each one of them has a sort of a fee attached to it, because of the way Bitcoin's kind of gone downhill over the last year, my transaction fee for transferring 3 Bitcoin was $2,000. So we actually started using Bitcoin Cash a lot more at that time. I also used many others. I've sent people Dash. I've sent people Ethereum numerous times. So I do use them, but if I'm just sitting here and I want to buy something and I have the option to get rid of the Federal Reserve notes, which I unfortunately have because a lot of people do still pay in those currencies, I'll get rid of those as fast as possible.
Yeah, that's interesting. And this is why I like talking to you, Jeff. I've never really had anybody explain it that way as far as, get rid of the worst currency first. But I guess it is a bit of a catch-22. We want people to adopt it. We want our local cafes, our hairdressers, our bars that sell us the margaritas, the golf clubs. We want them to be accepting crypto. And I accept quite a few cryptos with my business as well. And I got to say, like, some people send me Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, and Bitcoin does take the longest out of all of the currencies. And I'm not saying I love Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash or whatever. I'm just my experience. And I've done things like Litecoin, which happened in 30 seconds. Dash happens very, very fast. Zcash was very fast. And, Bitcoin Cash Bitcoin was taking quite a while. And I must admit, I did a Bitcoin Cash transaction recently, and it took a long time. And just on what you were talking about with the banks, I actually had an issue just before I came online with you with a client of mine in Doha in Qatar who sent some money to account. And there's some embargoes with Qatar at the moment. They're fighting with the United Arab Emirates and government's taking sides. So, you can't fly to the country via Dubai and you got to go via Muscat. And it's the same with the banks. So we sent, one of our clients paid us, and then we're waiting for the money. And we got an email that just said, sorry, because of the embargo, your fees will be returned anywhere between 14 days and 6 months. And I'm like, are you kidding me? 14 days and 6 months. Yet, as soon as I hit the transaction button, it's gone out of my account. So it's there in where is it? So it's bullshit as far as I'm concerned. So let's get into a bit more crypto there, Jeff. Somebody's just asked, I've forgotten the name. It might have been Eric again. What cryptos are you holding, mate, from an investment point of view?
I generally hold what we have in the Dollar Vigilante portfolio, which we have for subscribers. I definitely have a fair amount of Bitcoin. I still think it's going to do well. I'm not happy with the direction it's been going. We'll see what happens. Maybe it will turn around. But I know that it's going to do well, especially if it is being turned into digital gold, because then a lot of the Wall Street people and all that will have the thumbs up from the central banks that, yeah, it's fine. As long as it can't be used as a currency, go ahead and speculate in it and all that sort of thing. So we're seeing Bitcoin ETFs and all that sort of stuff. I have pretty much no doubt, barring something really unusual or unexpected happening, that Bitcoin will rise in value over the next couple of years. So for that reason, I own it. I'm not as happy about it as I used to be when it used to be digital cash. I try to own at least the same amount of Bitcoin Cash as I own as Bitcoin. And of course, if you own Bitcoin before August 1st of last year and you held the private keys and you haven't sold it since, you own 1-for-1 Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. So I always recommend to people to continue doing that. I actually was one of the biggest people coming out at the beginning saying, don't sell your Bitcoin Cash. I think it could do really well. It actually could turn into what Bitcoin was supposed to be originally. And it's done quite well because it kind of came out around a few $100s. And now it's been quite a bit higher than that since then. I also own some Dash. I like Dash for various reasons. I like that they have a marketing sort of angle to it, that some of the mined Dash coins are always put into marketing that you can vote on as a Dash holder. I think that's been one of the biggest issues with a lot of cryptos is there's no marketing department because it's just completely decentralized cryptocurrency. There's no office, there's no marketing department. Dash kind of has an interesting approach on that, and it's done fairly well. I own Ethereum, but most of the Ethereum I own, even though I did recommend it at $2 in January 2016, a lot of the Ethereum I own today is actually people sending me payments in Ethereum, and I'll oftentimes just keep it there. I've been a big buyer of EOS, which is just coming live now. I recommended it to Dollar Vigilante subscribers in summer of last year at about $1.30, and it went down to about 50 cents. And I recommend it again to buy again. It's been up a lot since then, and I'm really very hopeful and quite bullish on what that could do. Those are my main ones. I'm trying to think if there's any off the top of my. I like Monero. I also own some Monero, and the main reason I own Monero is because it really focuses on privacy. I think that's going to be key for a decentralized cryptocurrency in the future. The whole key to these things is that no government or central bank can even control it, but not even know where it is. And so that's where the privacy part comes in. Of course, with Bitcoin, every single transaction that you do is basically on a public ledger. Now, people might not know it's you, but there would be ways, if you're not smart about how you do it, that people could track down and probably find out who did those transactions. And if Amazon just patented a way for the road pirates, the police, the extortionists to track Bitcoin and things like that. So I'm a big proponent of privacy. One of the reasons I also liked Bitcoin Cash and their approach was a lot of the original intentions of Bitcoin kind of went by the wayside as it changed over to becoming a digital gold. And a lot of there was a lot of people working on privacy in Bitcoin in ways to do it on chain, that it just went away after they increased the transaction fees so much and slowed down so much, that Bitcoin Cash has the potential that it might do that now. So I think those are the main ones that I can think of off the top of my head. I might own a few others. I might own a little Zcash. I might own a little Litecoin. Litecoin's mostly just a speculation because I'm not sure where that's going, but I kind of spread my bets a little bit, but by far my biggest holdings are Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, and EOS. So
it sounds like, I mean, you got the same kind of approach as me, that you're sticking with the top coins, the top market cap coins. And I always recommend, and in the group, I sit back and I watch a lot of people talk, and I learn more from them because they're mentioning coins I've never heard of, and they see these little penny stocks and they want to chase them all. But, from an investment point of view, I really do think we have some exciting times coming. And I actually sent out a video to our members last night saying that I expected a bounce on Bitcoin at 7,100, and it actually happened overnight. But I still think it's going to fall down to $5,000, maybe sub 5.5. And it never ceases to amaze me how people, they've forgotten the last week how they've been complaining how it's been falling, and it goes up, and now everybody thinks it's going to the moon again. So, what price do you think Bitcoin will come down to? A lot of people say to me things like, what about that drastic deduction in price on Bitcoin? I say, well, look, this time last year it was $1,000. It went to 20,000. Today it's 7. You've got to kind of look at it that way. I mean, Jeff, you've been an investor for a long time. What other investment is in the world that is legal, where you put you put $1, you put $1,000 in, right, and it's worth $7,000 1 year later, and people are complaining about the dip? What price do you kind of think that Bitcoin is going to get down to? Some people have told me that below $5,000, it's no longer profitable for the miners. You got any thoughts on where you think? My thoughts are, I'm telling my people to accumulate now, just like you said with EOS. Below 7, gets down to 6, buy some more. I really think we're at a stage where we can start accumulating some EOS again, and Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I really think there's going to be a long-term investment opportunity coming very shortly, and we should be accumulating now rather than panicking. So where do you think the price of Bitcoin is going to sort of find its mark and turn around and go from there?
Yeah, you mentioned how many of these things are up massively. I recommended Ethereum at $2 about 2 years ago, and look at where it's at now. And people, as you pointed out, a lot of people are like, oh, but they're all down like 60, 70%. That was very needed. In fact, I almost called the top perfectly, not just to toot my own horn here, but I was shocked when I went back and looked at it. I put out a video on the Dollar Vigilante YouTube channel. I also said to TVV subscribers beforehand to start taking profits in Bitcoin and almost all cryptocurrencies right 2 days before Bitcoin hit its peak, right near $20,000, and it's been down a lot since then. You can look that up, and I started recommending to TDV subscribers to start buying again around 7,000, and it's kind of bounced off that a few times and hit up as high as 10,000 a few times. I have actually been hoping for a major crash, like an even bigger crash. I'd love to see Bitcoin below $5,000 for a couple of days, Bitcoin Cash below $400. So many of them, because I actually took a lot of profits from Bitcoin between $18,000 and $20,000, a lot, and that was most of my holdings at the time. And I still have a fair amount of that sitting just in fiat currency, in US dollars actually, that I've been waiting for like a spike panic low to back up the truck and buy as much as I can. We might not get it. It's looking pretty solid here at the moment. I might sound silly like a week from now, but at the moment it's looking pretty solid around 7,000, the Bitcoin level. If it goes down further though, and it totally could, I could see maybe touching 5,000 if we see something happen, maybe a bit of a panic for whatever reason. Some government comes out and does something or says it's illegal here, or some sort of problem happens. Or just we could even see in the other markets, cryptocurrency isn't just on its own. If we see the U.S. stock market, which is at ridiculous highs, it's going to crash very soon, probably this year. I think it's going to be the fall though. But if that were to start happening, in the next couple of months, which it totally could, we'd see the cryptocurrencies go down with it. There'd just be a general panic out of everything. You'd see bonds start to crash, interest rates spike higher, see the stocks crash, and then there'd be a general liquidity crisis. And this is what all is caused by central banks, and it's all done on purpose. And even then, you'd see a lot of people selling their crypto just to stay liquid. So we could see lower, and I'm hoping for lower. But if we don't, I still retain, it's got to be, I'm just guessing, I still retain well more than 50% of my holdings. Like I never would ever sell all my crypto. I believe in it that much that I would never take a chance and sell all of it. But I probably sold about half, and I'm probably a little bit up now because I did start buying around 7,000 Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash around $800 a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a month ago now. I haven't been buying, actually, you mentioned Scott last night. Right before I went to bed, I saw the numbers and Bitcoin was right around 7,000. I was like, this looks like a short-term bottom at the very least. And I was just too tired to buy. And I woke up today and it's up $500. But that's the way it goes. I'm not a big trader though. But yeah, we could see lower. And just as you said, if we do, and have some liquidity, if you don't, if you're all in on crypto, well, you just got to go for the ride at this point. And if you can't sleep at night, I would recommend just selling some, because this is very speculative. There's going to be so many changes. It's a highly dynamic environment. There's still a long ways to go before a lot of these things really come to fruition. We could see lots of ups and downs. So if you own too much, might want to consider the next time it spikes up a little bit, just taking a little bit of profit so you can sleep at night. I never recommend anyone lose sleep over these sort of things. And if you don't own any, that's the thing. If you don't own anything right now, start buying now. Absolutely. Just as you pointed out, but maybe not buy your full amount that you'd like to. Let's say you want to have a 10 or 20% of your assets in crypto. At Dollar Vigilante, we recommend 15% of your assets in crypto to be, very safe. We have a very conservative portfolio because we have grandmothers and people signing up for our newsletter. We don't want them to just piling into a very speculative instruments like cryptocurrency. But if you've decided you want to put 15% of your assets into crypto, and let's say you have, just to make the math easy, $100,000, so that's $15,000. Well, buy half of that now. Buy $7,000 of it right now. If it goes down, buy more. And if it doesn't, probably buy more as well, because it's probably going to go higher over the long term anyway.
It's the exact advice I give, and I think the people in my group get sick of me saying it, because there's a couple of things I keep harping on about, and one is exactly that. If you've got $10,000 to put into crypto, you don't have to wait for, I'm going to wait for Bitcoin to be 7,000, I'm going to buy it, and then it goes to 6,000, you panic sell it. It's the complete wrong way to do it. You can, even right now, this second, I've got orders spread across my Kraken account and my other accounts from 7,000 right down to 5,000. And I've learned in the past that there can be a huge wick that buys you in a Bitcoin at $4,800. And I gave the exact same advice yesterday. Was, do I think this is a long-term bounce? The market cap is now below 300 billion again. I think we're going to see 250 again, which brings us back just to where we were before it took off in September last year. So, it's been a very wild ride, but guys, it is some of the biggest advice I can give you is spread your buys, right? Spread your buys on EOS, Bitcoin, Ethereum. Mainly my method is 90% in the top coins and then 10% for a little bit of trading. I am a trader, and I make a living out of buying and selling and things like that. But I'm also very conservative, and 90% of my crypto holdings, when I'm not in fiat, is in the top 10 market cap coins, right? And then there's 10% aside for, want to trade, and then I take some profit. I stack a little bit of Power Coin or a little bit of, Zcash, and just I build it like that way. And I think it's the best way to do it. And as if Jeff says, if you're panicking so much and you can't sleep, you're probably over leveraged, and you don't need to. And don't be looking at your blockfolio every 2 minutes going, oh, it was 7 and now it's 6. Right now, it should be just about accumulation. Whether that's you've got $100, $1,000, $100,000, $1 million, just start accumulating. And as it goes lower, get excited. Don't panic. So that's the advice there. So I just want to talk, Jeff. We've got a few minutes left. So if you guys got any questions, we're going to take a few last questions. And then we're going to give away 2 tickets to the 2019 Acapulco. I went to Acapulco this year for the first year, and it was amazing. It was 3 days or 4 days. And what I loved about it, it's a combination of freedom, libertarianism, voluntarism, or whatever the word is that you use there, Jeff, mixed with solutions, which is crypto and blockchain. And just to be in an environment, there must have been more than 1,000 people there at the one last year. And to be in an environment where everybody's talking about love and freedom and solutions, and it was really amazing. So I know you're really amped about 2019, and you've promised it to be bigger and better and all that sort of stuff. So for those people out there who don't know what Acapulco is, do you want to just explain a bit about what that is, who you got coming to talk, what it's about, when it is, and then we'll drop some links, and before the end of the show, we're going to give away 2 free passes.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I was glad to see you here this year, and there was about 1,500 people this year. That was our 4th year. We're going into our 5th year in 2019, and it started off as being what we used to term it the world's largest anarcho-capitalist / voluntarist conference. And the reason we use those words is because some people get confused about it. If we say anarchist, they think we might mean anarcho-communism, so we say capitalism. But then when we say capitalism, a lot of people think we mean corporatism. All these words have been so skewed. And that's why the word voluntarism really has grown a lot, is because no one can really skew that word too much. Basically, what it means is you think all transactions between humans should be voluntary. You don't think someone should ever go up to someone with a gun and say, give me your money. And if you believe that, then you really shouldn't believe in government, because that's what they do, unless they don't have any taxation. And actually, every government on earth has taxation. It's the only way it stays in power. In fact, if they had zero taxation at all, and there's some countries that have zero, but then they take it in forms of tariffs, which are other ways of extorting people. If they didn't have anything, they'd just be a regular business. So in order to be a government, you have to be in the business of extorting people. So if you believe that we should have a world where people don't do that anymore, and I think we can get there, then you really are a voluntarist. And many people are waking up to that. And it grew from, it was about 150 people the first year, 300 the next year, 600 in 2017, and about 1,500 last year. And we're expecting probably over 3,000 in 2019. We've already signed up as speakers Ron Paul, Judge Napolitano, David Icke, bringing all sorts of interesting speakers to talk about what's going on in the world. We also have Cynthia McKinney, who's an ex-congresswoman who was one of the best and actually only decent Congress people. Basically, Ron Paul and Cynthia McKinney were the only 2 that I've ever seen that were decent people who didn't want to expand the state, and they wanted to get rid of it for the most part. She came out as an anarchist at our conference this year. She'll be speaking. And a big favorite of mine is a mentor of mine, Doug Casey. He'll be speaking. And we haven't even announced all the rest. It's going to be massive. No one's going to believe how big it's going to be next year. When they start to see what we're going to do, you really won't believe it. So yeah, you can check it out. It's February 14th to 17th. For the guys into crypto, the entire last day of an Acapulco every year is called Cryptopoco, and it's completely all blockchain and cryptocurrency related things, often with a sort of a freedom slant to it, because it really is a freedom conference. But if you're just into the crypto part, you can just come for that part. And I would actually come early and just hang out. It's nonstop parties. Last year, Wu-Tang Clan contacted me, some of the guys from Wu-Tang, a couple days before the conference, and said they were trying to get into cryptocurrencies, so they wanted to come down and perform. So we had them. I haven't announced some of the musical acts for next year, but it's just as big or bigger. A lot of them. It's going to turn into a bit of a musical festival as well. So just come down for the entire week. You can check it out at narcopoco.com. And as Scott mentioned, I'm happy to give out 2 free tickets to it here on his channel. And
it was really great to see you on stage with the Wu-Tang Clan singing your song there, man. That was you were hitting it pretty large, brother. I got to say, it was good fun. So yeah, we'll pick a couple of winners out at the end. So just a couple of last questions. We just got a couple of minutes left. A lot of people ask me about tax on crypto, Jeff. I mean, I think we all know your opinion on tax anyway. So, but is there anything that you know of or you can advise? Because I get a lot of, especially people from America and England, you know, and they're petrified. They'll always say, don't mess with the IRS, which is probably true. But any little tips or tricks, or is there anything that American citizens can do to minimize tax with crypto? I'm not really familiar with the tax laws of crypto and things like that because I don't pay any tax to anybody, haven't done for a long time. So you got any tax advice or any little tips or tricks or information or advice for people who are into crypto and you know, getting half of their profits being taken away in taxes?
Yeah, I'm the same as you, Scott. I don't pay taxes. I haven't paid taxes in decades, really, and I will never pay them because they're illegitimate, and I won't submit to extortion. I won't deal with terrorists, as George Bush liked to say, even though his family was behind 9/11. That's a whole other story. But yeah, it's kind of funny because in the land of the free, the IRS is really quite dangerous, and a lot of people really worry. The fact of the matter is, though, the IRS only has a few thousand employees. There's 300 million people in the US. Really, if you submit and you start giving them all your information, then you've basically almost given your complicity in them extorting you. You're kind of saying, well, I agree that you're allowed to extort me, so here's all my information. Once you do that, you're really in their system. I would recommend to people just stay out of the system as much as possible and just avoid it. Of course, be smart, be safe. And I'll just say right now, I'm not giving tax advice here because someone will come after me. And I don't even care. I'm not showing up to your government courts. You know, F you, couldn't care less. You're illegitimate. You're going to be gone from this world soon, and I can't wait. And but, you know, be careful. You know, keep your, you know, that's the whole point of crypto. That's what we're trying to do, is get it outside of the system where they can track and control it. But yeah, you have to be a little careful. But I wouldn't obsess about it or worry about it too much. And actually, I really laughed when I saw that the IRS put out a press release a few months ago, and they said, you know, we told everyone they have to report their cryptocurrency gains, and only about 1,000 people did it. And I was like, who are those 1,000 people? What are you guys doing? Don't do that. Because they have really no way to really track a lot of this, especially if you're smart. So there's smart ways to do it. But, you know, you have to think about what you want to do. If you live in the U.S., you are one of the most enslaved people in human history. They are tracking everything you're doing. They're watching everything. They're extorting you from morning to night. They're stealing it from you from inflation of the central bank. So you have to realize that. I recommend to a lot of people, as you probably do, Scott, just to get out of the U.S. You know, that's one of the most unfree, dangerous places in the world to live today, and it's going to only get worse with the dollar collapsing.
It's funny that you say that. I remember a story last year reading the Senate in the US. They were trying to battle the crypto thing. This was last year, and the best the Senate could come up with was giving immigration officers the right to ask somebody how much crypto you hold. I mean, none. What's crypto? I mean, what are you going to say? I mean, and these are supposed to be educated people, and that's the best they could come up with. All right, so we're going to finish up now. So we're going to give away the 2 tickets. There's 2 guys in particular who have been very, very active here today. Steve and Phil have been there active and asking a lot of questions. You happy to give those 2 guys a couple of tickets, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely. And if they can't make it for whatever reason, they're welcome to give it to anyone they want, or they could even just let us know if they can't make it and they don't know who to give it to, and we could actually find someone else to give it to. Maybe Scott, you can pick someone else, or whatever it is. But yeah, I'm happy whoever you want to give it to.
All right, we'll pick it up. So I'm just going to finish with a little quick fire round here, Jeff. You know, 1 minute, couple of questions. Top 5 coins, long-term investment.
I think we mentioned them: Bitcoin Cash, EOS, Ethereum. 5th one would be a little tough. Maybe Dash.
Okay. The outsider coin, maybe the smaller alt, lower cap mark that's going to come through in the next year or 2.
That's a tricky one. I don't know if I know of too many that I really am like really confident it's going to happen. I'm similar to you, Scott, in that a lot of the smaller ones, yeah, you can trade in them and we'll see what happens, but not too many you know, are anything close to a sure thing. So I actually really don't even look at most of the smaller ones.
Okay, no problem. So outside of crypto, right now, if I was going to invest some money, gold or silver?
I'd say silver. I think, it's around $15 right now. Gold's around $1,300. The chance of silver going to $100 to me just makes a lot more sense than gold going to like $7,000. So I think just on the leverage of the smallness of the silver market, if you're looking for appreciation in the precious metals, I definitely do both, but if you had to weigh one more than the other, I'd probably have a bit more silver. It all depends where you store it, because it's a lot, silver's quite heavy and quite cheap. So if you really want a large amount, you're going to have to, your truck will be like 2 inches off the ground driving it around if you've got a fair amount of money. So, it's really up to the person, but I'm quite bullish on precious metals. I should mention that. And that's what I said back when Bitcoin hit 20,000. I said, I would recommend you sell some of these cryptos and get into precious metals.
Yeah, I'm pretty big on telling people to diversify and take some profits, buy some property, buy some metals. It really is the way. Price of Bitcoin New Year's Eve this year.
Oh man, I hate these guesses. I was so wrong in 2017. They asked me in 2016 around November, when I think Bitcoin was around $300 or something like that, where I saw Bitcoin in 2017. And I think I said 3,000 to 5,000, and obviously it hit nearly 20,000. So okay. You really don't know. If I had to, I actually don't even like to throw out a guess. I'm not even going to answer that, because there's just absolutely no way to know.
Good answer. I was going to say, because, and that's another lesson I wanted to teach people, is nobody knows. If somebody out there says Bitcoin's going to be 20 grand, they don't know, right? Nobody actually knows. And the last one, the two big developers for the dApps, for the platforms, I think it's all going to come down to which platform the developers prefer. What do you think is going to win there, EOS or Ethereum?
Yeah, EOS is using things like C++, which a lot of programmers already know how to program. There's like positives and negatives to both. I would say for your average person, I think they're both incredibly important, and I would own some of each, almost to the same extent that I would say have about as much Bitcoin as you have Bitcoin Cash. Own it sort of one for one sort of a thing. Quite similar with Ethereum and EOS. EOS hasn't even been launched yet. We don't know if it's going to work or not. That's how new that is. Ethereum's been around a few years, but it's got some problems, and it's changing all the time, and we'll see what happens. But they're both really important. I would just basically own both at this point.
Great. Sounding like a politician there, Jeff. Good answer. I like that, mate. All right, Jeff. From behalf of myself, from Cryptocurrency Investing Facebook group and Cryptogasmic.com, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show today. For those of you who want to get some more info on Jeff, you can subscribe to the Dollar Vigilante. He's very easy to find online. We'll drop the details of the Dollar Vigilante and Acapulco 2019 down below. And everybody, love each other, be kind, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.